Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sirhan on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 14th of May of the calendar year 2025. It's actually a gorgeous day here in Cincinnati. Lots to get to locally and domestically. Let's get right down to it. Just touch right down to the big news here in Cincinnati that took place over the past couple of days. It was the official reinstatement of Major League Baseball to the hit king Pete Rose. Of course, it happens after his passing, the quote lifetime ban. Everyone's going to nitpick it the way they want to. But as I said, I was on a show last night with some great individuals, and I am going to reiterate my stance again on this topic. This was a backhanded compliment by Major League Baseball to Pete Rose. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows, Pete Rose is gone. He's looking down the gates of heaven. We know that Major League Baseball did whatever the heck they wanted to do to him for the better half of 3.5 decades since the ban wasn't, implemented. This was a backhanded compliment. Everybody knows this. I mean, they could have just simply just done away with it, got rid of it, be done with it. But they wanted to bring up this issue again. Of course, part of it was because a confrontation or a meeting met between the President Donald Trump and the baseball commissioner, Rob Manfred, which, Rob Manfred is not necessarily the saint of all saints when it comes to sports commissioners, as anyone in the baseball community well knows. This was an insult. This was a backhanded compliment during the time of it. And honestly, if I'm member of Pete Rose's family, I'm not happy about it because they had every chance to rectify the situation, and they didn't. Granted, I know Pete Rose didn't help his own cause with how he carried himself, how he handled the particular situation himself on his end. We get it. But Major League Baseball had every chance when Pete Rose was around to do something about it and didn't. And now they resorted to this after Pete Rose passed. Now, I remind you how they handled the 2017 World Series with the Houston Astros, where they caught with the entire cheating scandal, among many other things. Everybody knows the story with that one. So basically, if you want to put it in this sense, it was an insult and a backhanded compliment, and it basically one of the most degrading things in a way you could possibly do to Pete Rose. I mean, what more do you want to do to the guy? The guy's no longer with us. I mean, it is what it is at this point, isn't it? So we get it. Baseball basically said it was a lifetime ban, and basically the commissioner, Rob Manfred, says because Pete Rose, and I should add also, a part of this is Shoeless Joe Jackson. You know the story here about his affiliation with the Black Sox scandal in 1919 against, of all teams, the Cincinnati Reds, the team that Pete Rose played the prime of his career in. That just to say that after and openly admit it in a statement that was read to me last night by the individuals I was with shows how much of a degrading coward Rob Manfred is, and the whole thing was just an absolute publicity stunt. And basically, you could probably say financial monetary gain was the purpose of this. Now, granted, the best chance for this to take place is 2027 because there's nobody of significance in the Hall of Fame class. Maybe Buster Posey, the standout catcher for the San Francisco Giants, who was a part of 3 World Series with him. But this whole thing was just a farce. This whole thing was an insult. It was a backhanded compliment to one of the premier pitchers and players and iconic figures in sports history, not just baseball history, but in sports history. Now everybody's going to mention about his ability to go to the Hall of Fame. Not eligible till 2027. As I said, the class is very weak outside of Buster Posey. But let me just say this. We're going to have people who still, especially the historians who are about the integrity of the game, when anybody in baseball knows there's no integrity in baseball from higher powers, especially when we talk about Rob Manfred and these voters, because they think they have integrity when they don't. They're going to try to prolong this voting process to get Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame because the people are still going to hold it against him. They will. I think he eventually gets in. I don't think it's going to be unanimous because that's basically wild imagination. You hope it would be. But since players like Derek Jeter and Ichiro Suzuki weren't unanimous into the Hall of Fame, there's no way Pete Rose is going to be. I expect him to get in. I think he will get in. Honestly, if I'm those around his family, friends, or the ones who are real close to him, I basically would tell him say, take your Hall of Fame vote and shove it. But, that's not going to happen. But I expect him to get it. I think it'll get by the minimum vote, I believe, is 75%. And basically, at that point, you guys and everyone affiliated with the baseball just probably going to be happy with it. I mean, I don't have a problem with it either way. I get it from every angle of it. I get it from every possible view of it. But everybody knows there's still people that's going to hold it against him when his time comes, once he's on the ballot in 2027. And there's going to be people trying their best they can to keep him out. I think he eventually gets in. I think he barely breaks that 75% barrier that's needed. Maybe it doesn't happen in 2027, but I think it eventually will happen because there's going to be people that's going to try to, people who think he should get in, forget about whatever he did, versus those that we're going to try to hold him back because of what he did. So it's going to get crazy over the next few years when it comes to him. Every year in the Baseball Hall of Fame voting time and the voting committee, his name is going to be brought up. Everybody knows it. Everybody does. And we're going to find out who's right and who's wrong, who's real and who's not, because things going to get a little crazy over the next few years. People will probably hold that against him, which, I get it. But the smart people will tell you that he should probably get in. It certainly won't be unanimous because, as I said, if Derek Jeter wasn't unanimous, who should have been? And if Ichiro Suzuki wasn't unanimous, who should have been? Then Pete Rose certainly isn't with what he did. I mean, the career accolades speak for itself. The 75 World Series MVP, the hits, among many other things. What he did here in Cincinnati during his time here as a Red was, indescribable beyond words. Hopefully, we can get some conclusion to put this thing to bed for good, and hopefully everyone can just be satisfied. It's just a shame how this transpired, because it's even a worse look for Major League Baseball when you think about how they handled the World Series in 2017 when the Houston Astros won it. Everybody knows the story with what happened there, even after they openly admit it. Rob Manfred just basically poked him on the back saying, don't do it again, and basically just swept it under the rug. Tells you about how much of a circus act the people affiliated with Major League Baseball is and has been for the last several years. I can even go back before the Houston Astros scandal, the whole baloney with the performance enhancers when they had to go to Congress about it. Of course, we always talked about the Pete Rose situation, how they handled the lockout shortened season in 1994, which that was a joke, among many other things. But baseball didn't help their own cause with how they did this. I also say the same for the late shoeless Joe Jackson, who should have been in there long, long before also. The theory was, if Pete Rose goes in, so should shoeless Joe Jackson. I don't have a problem with it. I agree with it. And there we have it. So everybody can read up shoeless Joe Jackson with his affiliation with the 1919 Black Sox scandal. Ironically, it happened against the Cincinnati Reds, the team where Pete Rose had the prime years of his career in. And tonight out there in Cincinnati, just wanted to give the Reds a giant shout out for calling it Pete Rose Day down there. Try to get a ticket. Everything was just booked beyond the max real quickly. But good job honoring him. I tip my hat off to the Cincinnati Reds organization for devoting this day to the iconic Pete Rose. Now to other news here in Cincinnati, and to the flip side of all of it, more outcry of the situation between the Bengals front office and the fans, super fans, and media people versus the standout edge rusher, Trey Hendrickson. Those on my show the other day, I said pretty much that it was not just the organization, but it's also those fans and those super fans like Zim and the captain, among many others, and the media people like Sarah Elise from EBN, Kelsey Conway of the Cincinnati Enquirer, just to name a few of you, who are the reasons why this situation is happening with Trey Hendrickson. Because you guys want to push the narrative to get Jamar Chase and T. Higgins paid, but you left him on the side of the road. And Trey Hendrickson is not happy, and I don't blame him. Here's the thing. You wanted to get Jamar Chase and T. Higgins paid, you could have done that anytime you wanted. But you don't just pay them out of nowhere as quickly as you can while you leave a premier edge rusher on a defense that was basically a laughingstock even with them out to dry. I mean, no one's saying pay this guy Myles Garrett money or a Max Crosby contract, maybe a Daniil Hunter contract if you know the standout from the Houston Texans who got a 1-year $36 million deal. That would have been fine. A 1 or 2 year deal would have been doable. But he comes out and says there is no contact that has taken place. And apparently he was there yesterday because apparently head coach Zach Taylor threatened to fine him for missing. And Trey Hendrickson reiterated his stance, saying, I'm not going to play on my particular contract situation, which is going to be entering the final year of his deal in the 2025 season, which I think is a little bit excessive. I think he's going to honor it and play it and basically leave Cincinnati once it's done after the 2025 season, because I don't know if I'll go as far as the bridges are burned, but it's not helping Trey Hendrickson's cause simply because, if he does that, he can revert back to what happened to Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh. If you remember the story there, Bell wasn't happy with that situation, sat out the year, basically lost out on dollars, and later on regretted it, saying he wouldn't have done it. I expect Trey Hendrickson to be a part of the Cincinnati Bengals in the 2025 season once the season starts. Everybody's talking about trade. Problem is the offers aren't going to be what the Bengals want, because once this stuff gets out in the open, the way it is, value diminishes. And you have a 30-year-old Trey Hendrickson who's going to be 31 at some point this season. And when given the years he had, the last 2 years with the 35 sacks, and the last 4 years as 10 years of Cincinnati Bengal with 11 forced fumbles and over 70-plus tackles for loss, despite all that production, once you put this out there as it is, it's not a good look overall. Of course, part of it is his agent, Harold Lewis, who supposedly met with the Bengals brass before, and who knows what happened there. Trey Hendrickson comes out and says there's no communication. My guess is the Bengals have a dollar figure. They have an interest in him. Trey Hendrickson has a dollar figure that he wants, and there's no happy medium. There's no agreement. There's no talking. And it doesn't help when you have the Bengals fans, the super fans, and the media people here in Cincinnati who are so sick-headed and psychotically obsessed with wanting Jamar Chase and T. Higgins paid, and they forgot about Trey Hendrickson, and they came back to him now. Newsflash, I said this the other day, those fans and those super fans and those media people are also the reason why Trey Hendrickson is where he is and why he's not happy about it. I point the blame at you guys just as much as the organization. Reason why I don't say the organization much, because I've seen this for 3 decades. And there's a lot of you guys in Cincinnati that is late to the party and still don't get it. At some point, you need to learn how to grow up and get it. That's why I walked away from you guys at the end of last season, because you guys are just such moronic idiots who just don't get it. And I warned you a couple years ago, this was going to come, that you guys better take care of your business on the spot. You guys were throwing Twitter parties when you were picking up second-tier and third-tier offensive linemen like Orlando Brown Jr., acting like he was going to be the reincarnation of Anthony Munoz, the all-time Cincinnati icon at the left tackle position for the Bengals. And you forgot about how things work in the long term. You guys are so sick-headed, obsessed over the now, and don't think about the future. Look at what's happened now. You're more likely going to lose Trey Hendrickson at some point. Maybe he plays out the season. Maybe he's traded. Who knows? And I wish you guys nothing but the best, because the more you guys open your mouth, the more you guys carry yourselves like idiots, especially the Bengals captain and Zim, among many others, when it comes to this issue, the way you guys have acted over the last 4 years. Karma has come on your door, and I'm sitting back and I'm enjoying it. I don't want Trey Hendrickson to leave, and I want the Bengals to succeed. But I don't want them to succeed and have this happen at the expense of people like those super fans and the media people who ruin it for everybody. They're the reasons why a lot of this is happening. I do point blame at ownership, but not as much, because I've seen it for 3 decades, and they're performing their status quo, which is doing whatever they want, whenever they want. Is it the right way to go about things? More than likely, no. I don't think so either. But it doesn't help those fans, and those super fans and those media people are the reasons why a lot of this is happening. And when they miss the playoffs for the 3rd straight year, which is highly possible, I'll be coming at you guys again, because it's time for some accountability. Nobody wants to accept it. No one wants to hold people accountable. Somebody's got to do it, and you're looking at them. I'll be dealing with this probably more before the season starts, because there's still other kinds of mini camps and training camps, et cetera, et cetera. And this storyline is going to linger and linger and linger. We're going to find out soon who's legit and who's not. Because the 2-year window you had in 21 and 22, which was gift wrapped, you blew it. Largely because it took a Patrick Mahomes collapse and a Lamar Jackson injury for you guys to get to that point. Not to mention there's other teams that are just passed you by after that 2022 run. I'll be talking more about them more and more. Now, just some more outcry that took place the other day. It was the NBA draft lottery, and there's a lot of people yapping about it because the Dallas Mavericks got the first overall pick and the Spurs got the second overall pick. When you have idiots like Michelle Beadle running their mouths, the NBA draft lottery is fine because Michelle Beadle doesn't have a leg to stand on. Her false accusations of LeBron James at ESPN is just absolutely the epitome of why she's just a waste of a human flesh when it comes to talking. But I'll get about that down the line. I get it. I get why everyone's upset. I get the perception it creates, but there's nothing that you can do about it. I mean, we know what Dallas did with that trade with Luka Doncic. Everybody knows that. If you would have told them they traded Luka Doncic just so they can tank for a number 1 pick because they were in that play-in game against Memphis, you have another thing coming. Because there's no way they traded Luka Doncic just to tank for the number 1 overall pick. I mean, there's more to it. People still don't know why it happened. People still don't know why we had this. I get it. But let's not act like because of the Luka Doncic trade, Dallas got the number 1 pick. Because right now, Dallas is a huge, huge mess. And everybody's talking about they have 3 Hall of Fame players on that roster. One of them's going to be coming back from an ACL injury. You're talking about 3. You're talking about Anthony Davis, who's basically, when he's on, he's as good as anyone. He's just injury prone. Kyrie Irving's probably not going to be the same after coming back from an ACL tear, and he's at 31 because his minutes were running up before this happened. And you have the corpse of Klay Thompson, who had 2 season-ending knee injuries in a 3-year period at Golden State, and you can probably say he hasn't been the same since. So it's not act like, when they draft Cooper Flagg, which everybody knows is going to happen, he's going to go into the right situation because guess what? You have 3 guys in the downturn of their careers, and they're not going anywhere, even with Cooper Flagg. Because the Western Conference is still going to be fully loaded. You still have the Thunder. You still have the Nuggets. You still have Minnesota. You're still going to have teams like the Clippers. And Golden State's probably not going to be going anywhere unless Steph Curry retires. You have other teams like the 2 teams in LA. Say what you want, but they're still going to be there. Memphis and Houston made the playoffs. And the Spurs are going to do something because now they have a generational talent in Wembyama and the other rookie of the year, the standout Stephon Castle. They're going to probably find a piece to go with him. They did get De'Aaron Fox in that trade. They're going to be in the mix. Let's not act like Dallas is going to be going anywhere once the second they draft Cooper Flagg, because that's not going to happen. Because Cooper Flagg is not Luka Doncic. Anybody with a brain knows this. He's not Luka Doncic. And if he thinks to go into Dallas and just make that kind of an impact, that ain't happening. This isn't the Tim Duncan draft where everyone's fighting for a tanking position, and then the Spurs, we know, eventually got it in 97. The rest is history. It's not even close to that. What is the solution to all of this? I don't have one. I mean, you want to do how the NFL does it? Fine. But then you're going to encourage tanking, which we know the NBA has a problem with it. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't. People like Michelle Beadle needs to shut up. Just take it as it is and go with it. Now, I know the Spurs landed the second overall pick, but I think the Spurs need to start looking at bigger options. Now you have Wemby, De'Aaron Fox, and Stephon Castle. Now to get some key pieces to build around those guys. But for Dallas as a number 1 pick, it's an embarrassment if you ask me. Because how are you going to trade Luka Doncic, say defense wins championships, and then you find yourselves down tanking for the number 1 overall pick? That's something, they're going to have to answer, especially Nico Garrison. But as we all know, Nico Garrison doesn't like telling the truth when he's on the microphone. And basically, he doesn't need a microphone at this point because the more he opens his mouth, the more foolish he sounds, so he can dispose of him. The NBA draft lottery hasn't been the greatest thing in the world. I acknowledge that. Going back to the Patrick Ewing draft, when he was drafted number 1 overall by the Knicks, I believe it was like 85 or 86. I don't remember what year. But even that was a mess. The NBA draft lottery has been a mess ever since. And not the greatest, but you got to deal with it. And on another side note, just want to give get well wishes to the standout Celtics player, Jayson Tatum, the Achilles injury. You know what happened there in New York. Unfortunate. I mean, he was coming to his own this season. I mean, a lot of things were said about him over the previous years, and especially how he carried himself during the 2024 Olympics because he wasn't getting his minutes. Somewhat jealousy because Jaylen Brown was the rightful Finals MVP of the 2023 season, the 2024 NBA Finals, excuse me. But Jayson Tatum was starting to work at his craft, and starting to become a much, much, much better player. A lot of things were said about him being a diva or whatever, which is probably true. But he worked his butt off to try and put Boston in a position to go back-to-back, and he played pretty darn well this season, and this unfortunate thing happened. That's probably the only thing that was going to stop the Celtics from a back-to-back situation in Boston, and that's pretty much it. I mean, the series of the Knicks is still alive. I mean, they're still in it. I mean, as the great Rudy Tomjanovich once said, never underestimate the heart of a champion. We're about to find out the championship pedigree in Boston with all of this. There's still standout guys there, but it's a brutal blow because we're not going to see Jayson Tatum maybe till deep next season at the earliest. And we're not probably going to see Jayson Tatum in full form till the 2026-27 season because an Achilles injury like that takes a while to heal. Will he ever be the same again? Who knows? Of course, a lot of changes now from what it was back then when it comes to handling Achilles injuries. But hopefully Jayson Tatum could come back soon and still play at that high level because that's what he was starting to do before the injury happened. And last night, up in northeastern Ohio, the Cleveland fans got exactly what they deserved when the Indiana Pacers knocked them out of the playoffs, 4-1, winning 3 games in Cleveland. Everybody's calling this team a fraud or a fake or whatever you want to call it. They won 60-plus games in the regular season, but they were never pegged as a favorite to win the NBA title. So let's hold the horses on that one a little bit. I mean, multiple teams can win 60-plus games during regular seasons. I mean, we get it. It's not the only time we've seen a 60-plus team lose in the playoffs and go home because others have done it before. It's not the foregone conclusion it was back in the day when everything was so top-heavy. But let's not act like the Cleveland Cavaliers, being eliminated was like the worst thing in the world. I mean, could they probably get back to that point? Roster work has to be done significantly because they need to retool around Donovan Mitchell. That front line, especially Dean Wade and Jarrett Allen, just basically collapsed in the bright lights at a time when they needed to step up. They didn't. And what happened? The Pacers came on. The duo of Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam took over, and that was basically all she wrote. Look, you're not going to get a generational talent anytime soon because it's Cleveland. And when you're winning 60-plus games, it's going to be hard to find another generational talent piece to put alongside someone like that. I mean, you forked out the draft picks to get a Donovan Mitchell. I mean, it's worked. I mean, you've won 60-plus games. You've done something right. I mean, no one was going to pay you as a favorite to win the title. It was still Boston before the unfortunate injury to Tatum. And a lot of people are saying, call them fraudulent or whatever. They weren't. They just ran into a Pacers team that got hot. Remember, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals last season and gave Boston all they can handle for all those 4 games despite being swept. So it's not like Indiana was just a JV team that just came out there and Cleveland just rolled over and played dead because that didn't happen because the Pacers can play a little bit. And we talk about the 3-headed monster with Halliburton, Siakam, and the center Miles Turner. They can do some damage. They're going to the Eastern Conference Finals for the 2nd straight year. And they'll be more likely facing the Knicks if, at this point, that's how we're trending. Remember, they beat the Knicks last season with Game 7 at Madison Square Garden where Tyrese Halliburton just ran wild. But let's not act like Cleveland's loss to the season was basically a failure because what was the expectation? I mean, it wasn't a championship or bust team. They won 60-plus games, but they weren't really the favorite. I mean, Boston was a favorite, of course, before the injuries to Embiid and George, Philadelphia's collapse. They were among the favorites. I mean, the Knicks, when they got Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges, they were one of the favorites. So it's not act like Cleveland, it's just suddenly a fraudulent team or the Kenny Atkinson's Coach of the Year award was basically not deserving. He earned it. They won 60-plus regular season games. They just ran into a buzzsaw on the Indiana Pacers, who just demolished Milwaukee before this took place. Now, overachieved, you could probably say that because the roster was beyond flawed. We all know this. I mean, Donovan Mitchell played his you-know-what off, and he basically said he's not going anywhere because a lot of people are already calling for his head up in northeastern Ohio. I wouldn't go that far. Let's just chill on the Cavaliers a little bit. Let's see how the offseason goes. Lots of retooling needs to be done, especially in the backcourt and especially off the bench because it is needed. Because Donovan Mitchell can't just do it by himself. Somebody has to come off that bench and do something, or in the backcourt with him. Another guard is basically a massive need. They'll be back. They'll be fine. Now to the world of boxing, and once again, we're having a conversation about the mouth of Teo Lopez because he's doubled down on his stance and the word he used to aim at Terence Crawford. The mask is off. This is who he is. And at this point, whatever he says, it doesn't matter because the mask came off once he spat that word out at Terence Crawford. Let me remind everybody of one thing. Everybody's, especially him, was calling for a Terence Crawford-Teo Lopez fight. Years back, both Terence Crawford and Teo Lopez were one division apart, and they were under the top-ranked boxing banner promoted by Bob Arum. I mean, Teo was at lightweight. Terence Crawford, just before Teo started really making his mark, what was a premier junior welterweight, and the fight could have been made anytime Teo Lopez wanted it. And Terence Crawford would have welcomed it. He would have beat the brakes off of him then. But that was there for Terence Crawford to go get. That was there for Terence Crawford to go chase. And that was where Teo Lopez should have gone and go get it. Now he's calling for this fight years later after all the slandering and the word he used, and not to mention all the slandering he did to Vasily Lomachenko prior to their fight and after their fight, degrading Lomachenko's character as a human being. This is who we come to know as Teo Lopez from this point forward. And there's still people endorsing what he said about both Vasily Lomachenko and the situation in Ukraine. Everybody knows what that is. And the word he used toward Terence Crawford. Did I like what Terence Crawford did when he met Teo talking about breaking his neck or whatever? No, I did not. That I'll acknowledge as a Terence Crawford fan, I did not like that. But once that word comes out of your mouth, like it did with Teo Lopez regarding him, it's a whole new ball game, and the mask is ripped off. And there are people who are trying to endorse it, and there are people trying to support it. And there is the problem. Teo Lopez is once he used that word. That's the problem. And a major problem. Karma is going to come get him real soon. Everybody knows this. And he's talking about wanting to fight Boots Ennis. He already ducked Brian Norman Jr. He wanted guys like Tank Davis and Devin Haney. I think now after the use of that word, he's going to be getting those fights. And no, I don't want to hear about him using that as a way to get fights and sell fights, because once you use that kind of a slur, the party is over. Because all of those guys are going to wind up beating the brakes off of him because his 5 minutes of fame was up when he got an irrelevant win over Barbosa over at that wild card at Times Square, which is basically irrelevant. But Teo Lopez, once he spat that word out and once he doubled down on it, just revealed who he is. And I'm Terence Crawford. I got bigger fish to fry than him anyways. Teo Lopez had his chance to get a Terence Crawford fight when they were both on the top-ranked banner. They were only one weight class apart. It could have been easily negotiated because those in the fight game knows how Bob Arum can make in-house fights just like that. And he would have done it easily had Teo Lopez gone to Bob Arum and say, give me the Terence Crawford fight, because I'm damn sure Terence Crawford would have accepted it. And it would have been made. Now he's wanting it now. Says a lot about who Teo Lopez is as a human being, especially after you use that word and slandered Vasily Lomachenko. I'm already done talking about Teo Lopez. He can just cease to exist. And speaking of the more in the fight game, lots more to talk about. The return of Manny Pacquiao at age 46. Going to fight in July against the fake welterweight champion, Mario Barrios. Let me remind you of this. 6 years ago, he looked awful when he lost to Ugas in that decision. And prior to that, he beat Keith Thurman. He didn't look all that great. But Keith Thurman, we know, was at the end of his hourglass. His 5 minutes of fame were up, and Pacquiao took advantage of it. Deservingly so, rightfully so. People are still trying to justify the fact that Keith Thurman should have been given the decision. No, Manny Pacquiao was a right winner of that night when he beat Keith Thurman. He lost to Ugas and he looked awful. Had an exhibition, I believe it was last year, and he looked even worse. Granted, his only lookout he has, he's fighting the fake welterweight champion in Mario Barrios. So that's probably the only consolation he has in this. But if he wants to come back, have at it. I mean, everyone's talking about this all over the place. The only lookout he has, he's fighting the fake welterweight champion Mario Barrios. Everybody's comparing this to what happened, all the old guys that get beat down at the end of their careers. The perfect ones, of course, was Sugar Ray Leonard when he lost to Terry Norris, Roberto Duran when he lost to William Joppy. That wouldn't go that far because Norris was a generational talent, and Joppy, was a pretty solid middleweight. And Leonard and Duran were like way past it, and they had brutal fights. And even Duran was probably like 2 decades past his expiration date as a peak fighter. I mean, his prime years was at the end when he beat Ray Leonard in Montreal. But here's another case of a fighter who thinks he can come back and win a championship against a fighter at age 46. It's not the fact he looked bad against Ugas when he lost. He had an exhibition fight, and he looked even worse. And that's saying a whole lot when he looked that bad in an exhibition match. It says a whole lot. Now he's coming back against the fake welterweight champion Barrios. But, I wish him nothing but best because he hasn't looked good really in quite some time. We could probably trace back to when he was playing a face first by Juan Manuel Marquez in the 4th fight of that 4-fight series. Hasn't looked remotely close to good ever since. Had some decent wins, but nothing of significance over the particular decade from the time he got knocked out by Marquez to now. Of course, that circus act against Floyd Mayweather in 2015 took place, and among many others, lost to Jeff Horn, got 2 revenge wins over Tim Bradley. Didn't necessarily look all that great because the Pacquiao of old would have had Tim Bradley out of there, and he couldn't get that part of it done. So, and now he's coming back here after losing to Ugas, I think it was 6 years ago, and just a year removed from an exhibition where he was just absolutely dreadful. Granted, his only lookout he has, he's fighting the fake welterweight champion in Mario Barrios instead of the real champion Boots Ennis or Brian Norman Jr. Of course, he ducked a fight with Terence Crawford several times. We all know the reasons why. So, good luck against Barrios because you haven't looked good in over a decade, and I don't know how you're going to gather yourself up for this. I said the only lookout is it's Barrios and not Boots Ennis, because if it was Boots Ennis, we would have seen a bloody massacre in that ring. I'd like to see him come back and do it, but we know Father Time is undefeated. And it's probably going to be the same in this case. Now to a historical night that took place at the Great Western Forum in Inglewood, California, 36 years ago. This was a second encounter between Roger Mayweather and Julio Cesar Chavez. There's some significance to this. I'll touch on it here in a second. This was a rematch of what took place 4 years before when Mayweather was the mandatory to Chavez's super featherweight title. The first fight was an American TV debut of Julio Cesar Chavez. It was on the CBS Sports Sunday platform. Obliterated Mayweather in 2 rounds to successfully defend his title there. Mayweather, 2 fights later, gets obliterated by a journeyman named Freddie Pendleton. And I mean obliterated. I mean, he was hanging on the ropes when Pendleton just pounded him. Too bad Pendleton didn't pound him into the grave because Roger Mayweather should have no longer existed with his mouth. But Mayweather came back, won a world title, beat a bunch of Mexican fighters with similar styles, similar to Julio, to try and get that rematch. And after Julio cleaned out the super featherweight division, won both championships at lightweight when he beat Edwin Rosario and Jose Luis Ramirez, he was catapulted to the top stature as the super lightweight contender to Mayweather's title. And of course, with the Mexican assassin nickname Roger Mayweather put on himself, it put extra intrigue and it made Chavez more intrigued in this fight. Not much really to talk about with the rematch because, like the first fight, it was basically all Chavez. But unlike the first fight where basically Chavez just hit him and Mayweather dropped, by about the second or third round on, you started to see Mayweather go into survival mode. And this fight was just the epitome of what great Mexican fighters, especially Julio Cesar Chavez on this night, gradually, methodically breaking down Mayweather, wearing him down with relentless pressure, body punches, infighting. Even though Mayweather had his moments on occasion in the early rounds, from about the third round on, Chavez just took over to where Roger Mayweather, being the coward that he is in all walks of life, quit on the stool. And he still made excuses for it till his time, thank goodness, ended. But it was gradually broken down and wore out. All of his act was basically done. The significance of this was when he was raised and won the world championship. Julio Cesar Chavez became the 12th fighter in boxing history at the time to win world titles in 3 weight divisions. This was at a time when the alphabet soup started to expand just a little bit, not a whole lot as we did know today, but just a bit, to where it still had credibility. It still had credibility as a world champion, but it started to miss just a pinch. But still, when you put your name in the same category as Bob Fitzsimmons, Tony Canzoneri, Henry Armstrong, Barney Ross, Wilfredo Gomez, Wilfredo Benitez, Alexis Arguello, Thomas Hearns, Jeff Fennick, Roberto Duran, and Thomas Hearns. He became the 12th fighter, put his name in that category, being Julio Cesar Chavez. And that meant something back in 1989 when he made Roger Mayweather quit on the stool and win the world title. We know how the rest of the career spun out. The dramatic win over Taylor ascended to the stature of the best fighter pound for pound. His place in history, widely regarded as the greatest Mexican fighter of all time, although I think Salvador Sanchez would have had that distinction locked up had it not been for his tragedy in 82, because maybe he and Chavez would have likely crossed paths in an old Mexican showdown at one point, which I would have favored Sanchez. But probably the greatest Mexican fighter ever, due to the longevity at the top and the accolades. 2 times the fighter of the year. Had the fighter of the year in 1990 with Taylor. We know just how breathtaking that was. Among the Latino greats, probably top 5 or top 10 in that regard. We consider the guys up there with him. Guys like Roberto Duran, Alexis Arguello, Sanchez, I mentioned himself. Some of the Puerto Ricans you could talk about, like Wilfredo Gomez and Wilfred Benitez. Some other Mexicans, maybe before and during his time, were like Ricardo Lopez and Ruben Olivares. Some after him, like Eric Morales, Marco Antonio Barrera, and Juan Manuel Marquez. The thing about him is, for the longest time after his downturn at the back end of the 90s, we had all the influx of great Mexican fighters that came out, and the question for the longest time was who was going to be the, quote, new Julio Cesar Chavez. I mean, maybe it says more about who the new Julio Cesar Chavez was. They just did what they did, take their own legacy, because Julio's legacy, signed, stamped, secured, and delivered. Probably a top 30, top 35 all-time great fighter. I'd probably say from the back end of the 80s, after the Four Kings era of Leonard Hearns, Hagler, Duran started to fade, to the front end of the 90s, up to that fight he had with Pernell Whitaker in 93. From about 87 to 93, that era of boxing belonged to him, especially at least south of the heavyweight division, because the heavyweight division was still king with the bigger names, but he had that distinction of the best fighter in the world pound for pound, and that's what his legacy was, and always will be. I always said that era belonged to him. I mean, you talk about guys like Edward Rosario, who he just demolished next to nothing. The boxing lesson of Jose Luis Ramirez, making Roger Mayweather and Sammy Fuentes quit on the stool. The comfort behind win of Taylor, nitpick it all you want with everything that took place, have at it. To the victories over guys like Hector Camacho and Greg Haugen. That time, the sport belonged to him, and he was the premier fighter south of the heavyweight division, at the very least. You can say he was the premier fighter overall, especially after the wild fiasco with Mike Tyson took place after he lost to Buster Douglas and wound up in prison. But his place in history will forever be secure. Greatest Mexican fighter of all time, a top 5 to 10 all-time great Latino fighter, probably the top 30, the top 35 all-time overall. Depends on the criteria. As everybody knows, I don't partake in ranking system because I have no idea what the set criteria is. But Julio Cesar Chavez, you can nitpick anything of his you want, because a lot of people nitpick his career every single which way they could. Doesn't deter the fact that guy's still an all-time great. I mean, if that going 87-0 was as easy as 90% of you guys have said, How come are you guys sitting at home, not getting off the couch, and trying to go 87-0 yourselves? Because he did something right to go 87-0, and he deserves credit for it. Not nitpicked, not blamed. He deserves a lot of credit for it. He did something right. One of the premier all-time greats. One of the rare guys who combined sheer will and excellent skill and just showed brilliance of excellence at the peak of his profession. Definitely an all-time great. And it was 36 years ago today at the Great Western Forum in Los Angeles, California, built as the Fury at the Forum. He became the 12th fighter in boxing history to win a world championship in 3 different weight classes. The names that are attached to it again: Bob Fitzsimmons, Tony Canzoneri, Henry Armstrong, Barney Ross, Wilfredo Gomez, Wilfred Benitez, Alexis Arguello, Sugar Ray Leonard, Jeff Fennick, Thomas Hearns, Roberto Duran, add Julio Cesar Chavez to that list. Pretty darn impressive. That was at a time when winning 3 world titles was something of significance, and it meant something at a time when the sport was starting to get crazy with all the governing bodies and the multiple weight classes. So before it really got out of control, he got his 3rd world title. His name is etched in history with those guys. You can't take it away from him. I could talk more and more about that guy if I want to, because he was just a beauty and something special during his prime. And up the road, about a decade later, in Arco Arena in Sacramento, California, a real interesting HBO doubleheader took place. This was billed as back-to-back comebacks. It was 2 fighters, Michael Moore and Lennox Lewis, in their first fights after losing respective championships at the back end of 1994. You know, Lennox Lewis losing to Oliver McCall, Michael Moore losing to George Foreman. It was Moore fighting Melvin Foster and Lennox Lewis fighting Lionel Butler. Michael Moore, in his first fight since, gets a unanimous decision win. And Lennox Lewis, in a title eliminator for the belt that he lost to Oliver McCall, just gradually broke down and knocked out Lionel Butler in 5 rounds in his first fight under the tutelage of the late Emanuel Stewart. I bring this doubleheader up because a lot of storylines with these two were, can they bounce back? Which happens a lot with a lot of fighters, especially how those two got knocked out in their losses, if they could ever bounce back. Michael Moore was good, not necessarily great. Just got a workman-like 10-round decision based on punch volume, largely because Melvin Foster offered nothing. Of course, Foster was known for losing to the corpse of Trevor Burbick at the back end of Burbick's career. Michael Moore pounded a decision win. Lionel Butler despite the crazy record and all the losses he had some solid wins along the way over some former world champions, but was up in the rankings to fight Lennox Lewis. The winner of this was going to be the mandatory for the belt that Lewis lost to McCollin. Lewis took care of business. But the story with the Lewis end, this was the first fight for Lennox Lewis under the tutelage of the late Emanuel Stewart, his first fight with him, and the rest of it was history. I mean, he did get the title back from McCall, became undisputed champ the 2 fights against Evander Holyfield, the Cappers in 2002 when he obliterated Mike Tyson, and when he made Vitaly Klitschko a bloody mess, and the fight was stopped at the end of the 6th round. All that under the tutelage of Emanuel Stewart. This was the first fight that Lennox Lewis had Emanuel Stewart in his corner, and from that on, we know what Stewart did with Lewis. Escalated him to a top 5 to top 6 all-time great heavyweight, and it started on this night 30 years ago at the Arco Arena in Sacramento as a part of an HBO doubleheader. Emanuel Stewart just might be the greatest trainer to ever walk God's green earth when it comes to training professional boxers. Just a terrific trainer. May God rest his soul. And I conclude with just a bit of a rant, because everybody's talking about it. It's going to be released officially within the next 10 to 15 minutes, but everybody knows what it is. Some of it's already been released. It's the NFL schedule coming up. Everyone needs to just stop the hubbub over it. And maybe the NFL should just go ahead and release it all instead of just playing all of this games of, okay, we'll release this game, we'll release that game, we'll talk about this game this day, this game on Christmas, this game on Thanksgiving. Just release the schedule and we'll be done. And everybody making big deals out of who's playing who, who's playing where, who's playing what time needs to shut up, because it's just a schedule right now. Doesn't matter what time it is, because now we have flex scheduling. Doesn't matter where you guys playing it. Teams got to play 8 to 9 games on the road anyways. The schedule is going to come out. There's nothing fancy about it. It's going to come out. It's going to be released. You guys can nitpick all your games, who wins, who losses. Doesn't mean anything what you predict because it's not going to matter in the end. Matters what happens on the football field. Especially the Hub Pub here in Cincinnati, where Bengals fans are once again crying like people who need Kleenex tissues because there's crazy about a primetime game supposedly taking place in Baltimore for the 4th straight year. First of all, Bengals fans need to flat out shut up. Second of all, if you want to do something about that game, why don't you just go up there to Baltimore and win it instead of complaining about it on social media? It's not going to get you anywhere because they have the better team, they have the better quarterback, they have the better running back, they have the better defense, they have the better head coach. If you got a problem with that in Cincinnati, just check out. Okay, enough is enough. The schedule's going to be released today. Enjoy it. Just have your 5 minutes of glory with it because it's not going to matter once the football is going to be kicked off of the 2025 season in Philadelphia when Dallas goes over there. Everybody makes this big deal out of the scheduling, which I get it. It's always something to look forward to. But you guys know they do the team rotation, not the scheduling, the team rotation after a season. You have your home teams, you have your away teams, all the team websites post it. You can feel who's going to be playing who on what time. And you know there's so many other freaking factors when you talk about scheduling, road trips, injuries, team play, et cetera, et cetera. One team could, click on all cylinders. One team could just bottom out to the trips of Satan's house. We get it. Let's not act like when the schedule comes out, you know exactly what's going to happen, and it's the greatest thing you guys ever saw. It's coming out fully here soon, but enjoy it. Look at it. Don't make a big deal out of it because it's not worth making a big deal out of. Okay? Because I'm not. I saw some of the leaks, some of the big games, or whatever you want to call it, at least perception-wise. But who knows? Maybe those big games don't wind up being big games as the games go on. That's why I don't make the Hub Pub like 90% of the fan bases, especially in Buffalo and Cincinnati, do. Because both of them are still fixated on what happens when the Chiefs play or when they're going to be playing the Chiefs. Newsflash. Chiefs have bigger fish to fry than you two right now, so you guys better just worry about your own business. The time will come when you guys can worry about them. But handle your own business. Take care of your own business. That's something you two in Buffalo and Cincinnati, respectively, haven't done over the past several years. Take care of your business first before you worry about what somebody else does. I swear, everyone makes a big hubbub over something they read on the social media platforms and on the internet, and they cry over some of the stupidest stuff. I'm freaking 47 years old, and I make a big deal out of nothing. Okay? There are people older than me who make a big deal out of everything. Everybody needs to calm down a little bit. It's just a scheduling show. It's like the equivalent of you going into the workplace, you clock it in, you get your work assignments for the day, and you go do it. That's all the NFL schedule is. You look at it, you see what's going on, it's over. No reason to make a big hubbub out of it, good, bad, pretty, or ugly. Because the schedule release does not dictate who's going to do what in the season. Plain and simple. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I hope everyone had themselves a wonderful rest of the 14th of May 2025. As always, make self-care your number one priority in life. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. If you take care of yourself first, good things will come your way, and it would mean the world to you. Because you take care of yourself first, focus on yourself first, distance yourself from all the negativity, you're going to do just fine. I had to learn that the hard way. Have a good rest of the night. I will be back here soon. Take care of yourselves, and God bless.